before I get started, quickly want to mention that a lot of the mattes in this palette can be duped with the mattes in Aurora Struct from ColourPop. Now, I chose to not use Aurora Struct. It makes no sense to ask you to buy another palette. Another palette that might have some dupes for this palette is this beauty from Adept. I don't know what this palette is called, but it's essentially a seahorse themed palette. And I'm pretty sure some of the colors in this palette are dupes. I have a full review of this palette with swatches and everything. If you're curious for like whether there are dupes, you can look at those swatches. But again, the reason I'm not using any of the colors from this palette is that the purpose of this video is for people who don't want to go buy a palette. Frankly, if you wanted to spend money to buy a palette, you could have just bought Cold Moon. Another thing I want to mention are a few singles that I didn't use in this curation of the palette, and there are singles from JD Glow. I have Visions, Unexpected, and Hey Papi that I think could be dupes for some of these colors, but I didn't use them. So if you have these as singles, you can consider using them for some of these colors. Also, beauties, I don't own the Cold Moon palette, so to figure out which of these singles that I have could be dupes for which shades in the palette, I used the first 2 minutes of Bad to the Brows video on this palette where she actually had swatched all of the colors in the palette. I think later in the video she does some suggestions of dupes. I didn't want to be influenced by that, so I did not look at her dupes. I'm actually very curious to see what colors she suggests, just to see if there are any coincidental dupes in what I'm saying and what she identified as a dupe. So I want to watch that after I record this video. I'm gonna swatch row by row, top row all the way to bottom row. So the first color I'm gonna swatch is what I thought would be a good dupe for Snowdrops, and I picked OP or OP by Terra Moons. The color based on the swatch that she did looked kind of flaky. It also had the same shifts in that video as this color. So the green to pink shifts in this color looked very similar to what Millie showed. So I thought this could be a good dupe for that color. And then for the next color in that row, which is a matte, it's sort of a coral matte called Winter Rose. I picked French Hens from Sydney Grace, which is such a beautiful coral shade. The next color in that same row looks like a very interesting gold to pink. And in the swatch, it kind of could be a holochrome. So I picked Celestial from Copacetic Cosmetics, which has the gold to pink shift and the holochrominess. There are other shades that I thought about using instead of this shade, but of the colors that I have, this is a pretty good dupe for this color if I wanted the holochromy effect. If you just want a pink to gold, actually, as I mentioned, one of the colors in the Seahorse palette from Adept is a great color for that kind of a shift. The next color in the top row, Orithia, I think is the name of the color. For it, I picked another color from Sydney Grace. This is October Odyssey, the light version. I think this was in one of Temptalia's palettes. Some of you might already have this color or the Temptalia palettes. Next color in that same row is called Snow Fairies. For it, I picked Angel Wings from Luxie, which is a beautiful, beautiful shade that has that same wet looking effect with different types of shifts. So this looks like a pink base with what looks like green shift from some angles and a blue shift from some other angles. And then, of course, the wet looking effect. Next color is a brown color for that. I also picked a color from Sydney Grace. This is Beyond Beauties. You're going to see a lot of colors from Sydney Grace. I love Sydney Grace mattes, so that is why I use them. The name of the color that Beyond is a dupe for is Garnet. And our next color is called Forbidding in the palette. And for that, I picked this color from Glaminatrix. This is Scarlet from their Glimmer collection. It's a beautiful shimmer that looks like it has tiny sparkles inside. And it totally matched what Millie swatches in that video. I'm gonna link the video that I'm talking about in the description box below. I'm just assuming if you all like these kinds of swatch videos, you probably already know Millie Bat to the Brow, but just in case. Also, beauties, I think I forgot to show you all my nails. Yes, these are very wintry nails with snowman and super cute. These are from Dashing Diva. Also, beauties, if you're enjoying these kinds of videos, don't forget to give this video a thumbs up and also consider subscribing if you're not subscribed already. It really helps my channel. Let's go to the second row. The dupe I picked for Mocha is Sea Breeze from Sydney Grace. But as I mentioned, if you're trying to dupe this and you don't have these colors, definitely check out some of the colors in Aurora Struck from ColourPop. For Saturnalia, I picked Alternativka from Glam Shop. It seemed, based on Millie's swatch, that this was a little flaky. It had a pink base with a kind of a blue-green and tealy goldy shift. And this color has all of those. You're gonna see in a minute. So beautiful. For Catmint, I picked Esme from Divina. Beauties, in different kinds of swatches, this color looked different. In some swatches, it looks a little bit more aubergine, and in some swatches, it looks more this color, which looks like it's a little more gray. I went with this. I couldn't really figure out what the actual color is supposed to be. But if you want to pick an aubergine color, I definitely found dupes, aubergine type of dupes in my Sydney Grace collection for that color. For the next shimmer, which is Hyon, I decided to pick this one, Ethereal from Copacetic. The shade, based on Millie's swatch, looks like it has a pink shift and a tealy bluey shift, and it also looks like it could be holochrome, which this color is, and it does have both of those shifts. You're gonna see in a minute when I show it in a different light. It might be a little darker than that color, but for my purposes, I think this is a pretty good dupe. Another thing, beauties, that in the swatches that Millie had, this color looked a little too similar to Snow Crystal. They both looked like they were going from a pink to a teal shift. So I wanted to pick a dupe for one of these two that was distinctly different from the other one. So I purposefully picked this one. You're gonna see what I picked for Snow Crystal. That one is a true purple to teal shift. And then we have Transformation. Again, beauties, these colors, depending on which version of the swatch you look at looked different, but in some swatches it looked kind of greeny gray, so I went with that. This is Moss from Sydney Grace. I also wanted to use some dark shades because when you look at the photo of the palette, not all of these colors look dark, but in the swatches, they look pretty dark. So I kind of tried to go by the swatch. And then the next shade, Wolf Moon, I picked Lucent Ray from Divina. This is one of the moonscapes that has a very tiny hint of lavender, and I picked this one on purpose. If you don't want the lavender hint, you can pick another one of the shades. This is also a color that you can use Visions, for example, from JD Glow to dupe if you want it to be purely silver. And for the last shade in this row, Mother's Night, I picked this shade from the Fighter palette from Fantasy Cosmetica. I already took it out. This is the shade. I realize I don't have a lot of cool toned browns, and this is a very beautiful cool toned brown, so it was a good substitute. Another one that I thought could be a substitute if you don't have this palette is Brownie from Glaminatrix's Sugar and Spice palette. That is another nice cool toned brown. I realize I don't have any cool tone browns that is not, any cool tone brown mattes that is not from a palette, which is why I had to sort of pick something from a palette. I don't even think Aurora Struck from ColourPop has a cool toned brown. Cool toned browns are pretty rare, in case you haven't noticed. I mean, cool toned brown mattes. And I have realized that, you know, when I'm off my no buy, I would need to buy a few cool toned brown matte singles perhaps. The next shade is Snow Crystal, which based on Millie's swatch shifts between teal and pink and also purple, and could be possibly a holochrome. For this one, I picked Lucid Lavender from Touch of Glam, which is a shimmer multichrome that goes between purple to magenta to teal. Touch of Glam also has the holochrome version of Lucid Lavender called Lucid Hollow, which I have. I'm not the biggest fan of holochrome shades from Touch of Glam. I feel like the shifts in this holochrome are not as evident. You don't really see that much of a teal shift, which is why I picked Lucid Lavender, just a regular shimmer. But if you have the holochrome version, you can use the holochrome version. This shade is extremely, extremely shifty and shimmery and beautiful. I believe this is one of Touch of Glam's best sellers, if not their actual bestseller. For Cold Moon shade, I picked Thunderbird from Sydney Grace. Again, beauties, if you're enjoying these kinds of videos, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. It helps the algorithm recommend my video to other people who might find these kinds of content interesting. The next shade, Surrealis, or the next shimmer, Surrealis, did not really impress me based on what I saw in Millie's video. It seemed kind of like a cool toned purple shimmer that had some shift of gold from some angle. To me, I thought any shade that I pick is going to look too similar to this one from Divina, Lucent Ray, that I already used. So I decided to pick something a little more special, and I picked this one. This is That's What She Didn't Say from Touch of Glam. Now, this is not really a dupe for that color. This is a little more shifty and sparkly, but this is sort of a darker purple, and it's more purple than that color, and it has other kinds of shifts as well. So this is my version of dupe for Borealis. And then the next shade is sort of a light green shade. Again, it's a little bit difficult to know what these shades look like for real because I've seen different kinds of swatches and that look different. And I think some of these swatches, the photos have been modified after the photo was taken. So I just went with a light green. This is Honeydew from Sydney Grace again. Also, I'm not a huge fan of super pastel-y shades anyway. They rarely show up on me, so I was very happy to substitute them with something more pigmented. Again, beauties, the green shade was a dupe that I picked for Winter Solstice, and the next shade in the palette is Kali Zards, and it looks based on Millie's swatch like just a normal, possibly a flaky, and possibly a little bit of a holochromy, but just like a regular holochrome, nothing super special. And for that, I picked Moonbeam from Divina. This is also another color you can use one of the JD Glow shades to dupe. This is a beautiful, beautiful, very shimmery, super sparkly and bright shade from Divina. And then we have Rebirth, which looks like a dark gray. For this, I picked Petrina from Divina. Now, this is a little bit more plum than just gray. I picked this by choice because I already had picked other grays. I didn't want to pick too many grays, and I was happy using something that was a little bit purpley to go with some of these other purple shades. But you can always, obviously, if you have, pick just a flat, dark gray matte. I love Petrina. This is one of my favorite shades from Divina. And then last, but definitely not least, we have Storm Fairies. And for this one, I picked a shade that I just received yesterday from Shine by SD. I ordered this in the Black Friday sale. This shade looked so extremely beautiful and shifty that I was like, I have to use this. This is Denim Dream, and it has a purple shift and a blue shift, and it literally looks like it's made up of tiny glitter particles. Now, this might not be exactly a dupe for the shade in that palette. I feel like the shade in that palette based on Millie's swatch is not this blue, but going with all of these other blue colors, I was totally happy picking this one. Obviously, you can pick something that is more diffused and not this blue. I also feel like this color should be used over a tacky base. It's very glittery, and you see all of these particles going everywhere otherwise. So the Snow Fairies shade in the palette has a silver shift that this one doesn't have, but then instead it has a purple shift that I thought really goes with all of the other purple shifts we saw in the rest of the palette, and also the colors that I specifically chose. If you want me to do eye looks with this palette in this channel, write me in the comments below. Beauties, thank you so much for being here, beauties. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up. If you enjoy these kinds of contents, I have a whole playlist where I swatch different kinds of single shadows. I also have playlists doing custom made palettes and also duping favorite palettes. That playlist is going to be recommended to you at the end of this video. So stay tuned. I love you all. Have an amazing day. And until next time, bye.